Equality and its immoral limits on dynamic processes and existential uncertainty, as featured in Belonging Again by O.G. Rose. Morality defines the parameters of equality, and a society's morality defines to whom equality is extended. Though not all societies agree on what constitutes murder, all societies agree murder is wrong and that equality and tolerance are not to be extended to those who commit the crime. Societies readily discriminate against murderers. They are imprisoned and punished. And choosing to murder, the murderer chooses to have his or her equality denied. Yet this discrimination isn't a denial of the person's humanity. On the contrary, equality is denied precisely because the society so respects humanity and autonomy that it creates a system of laws in order to preserve humanity and to bestow individuals with the choice and ability to give their humanity up in breaking those laws. This possible denial and the consequences are a sign of respect. Individual autonomy is so cherished that the individual may choose to efface it, though this isn't to say societies desire unlawful action. In other words, the individual is free to be free from freedom. Only in a society with law is the freedom to give up freedom possible. For where there are no laws, individuals must be free, and so cannot be free from freedom. In this sense, humans cannot be as free outside of society as they can be within it. Furthermore, freedom cannot be as meaningful, for those who must be free cannot necessarily be defined from those who choose to be free. Forced freedom can cause existential uncertainty, and arguably the one who must be free is not as free as the one who can give up that freedom. Where there is no society, individuals cannot choose liberty. Not to say people always like this choice, though. The fact that humans are imprisoned for murder while animals are not isn't because the society values animals above humans, but exactly the opposite. Because animals are denied equality with humans, at least on a societal level, animals cannot be imprisoned. Animals are utterly free. They can murder and eat one another, violate one another's private property, and so forth, and not be punished by a court of law. Hence, imprisonment, laws, and so forth, things often viewed as what violates equality and human dignity, can be present precisely because human dignity is valued. Without them, humans might prove less definable from animals. Section 1. We don't simply want equality. We want good equality. Humans don't want to be equal with monsters, for humans don't want to feel equivalent to monsters. There seems to be two ways to go about accomplishing this: claiming monsters don't exist, or creating a system in which monsters can be defined from humans, though admittedly no system is perfect. Without laws, the immoral cannot readily be defined from the moral socially, and so it cannot be said to whom equality is due and to whom equality isn't due. Consequently, equality becomes empty, or at least cannot be called good. If murderers are treated the same as saints, arguably being a saint is meaningless, as is being a murderer. Now, a saint is arguably a saint because he or she treats a murderer well, despite the murderer's shortcomings. Anyone can treat good people well. But that's not the same as saying that a murderer doesn't have shortcomings at all, or that these shortcomings should be ignored. In fact, pretending that they don't exist could be to deny saints the opportunity to prove themselves as saints, which isn't to say there wouldn't be saints without laws, only that it would be more difficult to define them as such. Equality that erases distinctions is very different from equality that overcomes distinctions. The first is meaningless and hard to define from nothingness or non-distinction, while the second is good. In defining to whom equality is to be extended, laws help make equality good. Where there is lawlessness, there is equality as there is freedom, but both can prove devoid of meaning and desirability. This isn't to say every law is good, that courts are perfect, or that laws cannot be used for evil, but that laws seem necessary to some degree to make freedom and equality desirable. Everyone might be equal and free in anarchy, but everyone also lives in fear, chaos, and anxiety. Where freedom and equality are not desirable, it might prove rational to vote work and will them away. To discriminate against those who murder isn't bad, for what discriminates in favor of the good is good, not that this is easy to identify. Furthermore, where there is no discrimination, there is little meaningful difference between good and evil. But on this point, someone might claim that discrimination and distinction shouldn't be used like similes. Often, when people discuss discrimination, they mean immoral distinction. But I fear that this definition requires the assumption of a worldview and what is a distinction for one person could be a discrimination to another. Practically, the act of drawing a distinction and discriminating are extremely similar and perhaps identical, and I fear that treating the terms as clearly distinct has contributed to us failing to identify a severe sociological problem that this paper hopes to elucidate. Yes, we can arguably draw a line between discrimination and distinction, but this paper will argue we need to see the terms without that clear distinction present to understand something important. Discrimination against what isn't immoral is arguably immoral, for it is a denial of a person's humanity that the individual has not chosen to give up, in concordance with the society's laws. In other words, immoral discrimination is to violate an individual's freedom to deny his or her own humanity by denying that humanity against the individual's own will. It is to take away one's freedom to give up freedom, axiomatic. While laws set parameters by which we can maintain our humanity, immoral discrimination forces us to give it up. The basis for equality is a human's free ability to give up his or her freedom, a free ability that is needed so that freedom doesn't alienate. Without laws, humans would be forced to be free, and where freedom is limitless, freedom can prove void. Yes, perhaps in a forest we wouldn't have to work a job we hated, but we also couldn't escape the constant feeling of being in danger to the elements, nor could we feel like we had a way to rise above the animals, and at least work provides us an opportunity for retirement. Likewise, without limits to equality, equality wouldn't be good, for we would be socially equivalent to those who did terrible things to others. Equality and permissiveness would feel like similes. And yet limits on equality are what equality seeks to deconstruct. Freedom and equality are given substance through law, yet laws are the very things which can impede them. As what constitutes desirable equality is relative to morality, so likewise desirable diversity is relative to what we believe is right and wrong. If we want diversity, we want to be diverse amongst those who we consider moral. We don't want to be diverse with KKK members, Nazis, etc. We feel no moral obligation to be inclusive of those whom we believe are immoral, and arguably certain. In fact, we can feel a moral obligation to exclude them, believing including them would be to approve of their immorality. When it comes to obviously immoral groups like Nazis, this good exclusion isn't a problem, but the passionate disagreement begins when it comes to excluding those who some consider moral and others immoral. Like equality, to wade through these difficult waters, diversity requires either free exchange or law, as we'll discuss, both of which come with their own risks. As we don't want equality with murderers, lest equality not be good, so we don't want to accept murder, lest acceptance becomes evil. As we don't think it's wrong to deny equality to those who are immoral, so we don't think it is immoral to act intolerant toward those who we think are intolerant. In a sense, we believe it's just to treat the intolerance with intolerance. And in such a just act, our expressions of intolerance hide themselves from us behind justice, in the same way as does our acts of denying equality to the immoral. Intolerance often hides itself in the act of being expressed. It is self-concealing. This doesn't mean we should tolerate evil, but that we have a problem if overcoming injustice requires those who commit the injustice to realize that they are committing injustice and in the wrong. If someone spits on a crucifixion, a Christian would think the person should be punished with a big fine, while the person spitting on the crucifixion might believe mockery and slander are necessary to awaken people from out of a cult. Rational argument doesn't work. If someone believes that people with high IQs should finance universal basic income to those with lower IQs, seeing as the society unfairly privileges IQ, this individual might see their position as highly ethical, while other people might see it as radically discriminatory and ineffective. The high IQ people will leave for another country, unless perhaps travel is made illegal. The person who believes high IQ people should pay this money is not likely to change their perspective through argument. But if suddenly their child were to turn out to have a high IQ and struggle to pay her mortgage, for example, the person may have a change of heart. Until the person's own child is turned out to have a high IQ, the possible discrimination of the person's original idea was self-concealed to him. Then, due to a non-rational experience, the person saw problems which were always lurking. On the other hand, someone reading this may think it's a great idea to make people with high IQs pay higher taxes, for according to their axioms, freedom is irrelevant without fairness. Even if no law is passed which forces high IQ people to pay fines or higher taxes, someone who holds corresponding beliefs will easily act differently around high IQ people. He might not be interested in the conversation. He might be busy to attend. He might be too busy to attend parties. He might keep checking his phone. When people hold certain views about justice, it's not that they will necessarily attack or try to imprison people who disagree. Rather, they might not socially engage in the same way. This might make interactions with the person less fulfilling, and so those interactions might weaken and relationships dissolve. Separation and atomization might occur, which suggests why a nation with different axioms, givens, and notions of the good will prove fragile. It is simply existentially exhausting to be around people who don't share our worldview. For the very act of being around them can make us reflect on how our worldview might just be a worldview, which is destabilizing. Furthermore, it is hard to put on a face for people who we think might be supporting an injustice, or at least not fighting one. In fact, interacting with such a person might be contributing to the injustice, and so the social order might weaken. Section 3. Equality is not extended to the immoral and or those who break the law. And though not all immorality is necessarily illegal, laws of morality often blur. On the level of the state, laws are the boundaries of general equality, while morality more so constitutes the boundaries of equality on the individual level. What laws the state decides to pass tend to mirror the moral convictions of the people, but not always or absolutely. It is immoral on an individual level to lie, but not always immoral on a societal level. It depends. However, please note that without law at all, it would not be possible for a person to choose to act in a way that surrendered his or her moral equality with others, which could reduce the meaning of that equality. So I want to stress again that this is not a free exchange versus law conversation. Both are needed, and that is the problem. Because of this contingency and disconnect, it is important that laws not try to replace morality, but rather be the parameters in which free individuals can determine and live out morality, and so have high equality extended to them, and have equality extended to them. When laws and individual moralities overlap, it's a secondary matter versus primary. More so than a matter of ethics, a primary point of laws is to trace out the best point of trade-off between freedom and equality. Ideally, laws define the precise point where immorality, legality is to begin and end, so that individual liberty is maximized, but rarely are laws ideal. It can be moral to let people define morality for themselves, but such macro morality exists on the societal level more than individually. Moral laws let people define morality not because there isn't absolute morality, but because it is up to people to determine if such is the case. If the people can't, they can't readily be free, for a necessary element of freedom is the ability to define and pursue the good, where the standards by which it is determined to whom equality and or human rights are to be extended are constantly changing. There are no parameters in which freedom can be developed and or defined. There is chaos, and though like freedom and being unlimited, it is meaningless, random, and socially destructive. How do we determine when morality and laws should cross? We don't need to. The point of laws isn't to punish the immoral so much as it is to define the socially immoral, which are those who violate the principles necessary to preserve a dynamic system in which the good can be determined by individuals. But what is the dynamic system? Well, it could be called the free market, but no doubt that language connotes negativity. It is important to note that the free market is a market of ideas before it is a market of services and products. For the latter is impossible without the former. Everything that is was first an idea. It is unfortunate that the term free market is used to refer to business and conservative values, because now we lack a widely known phrase to refer to an arena of decisions, creativity, and experimentation, or free exchange. If rather people use the phrase, say, like the free laboratory, or, again, free exchange, perhaps people would be less resistant to what free market is meant to refer to. But I'm not sure. Still, in hopes of avoiding emotional resistance and misunderstanding, from this point on, the phrase free exchange will be used in place of free market. Furthermore, in preparation for future points, it should be noted that there are levels of necessary existential uncertainty, such as in regard to whether or not someone would kill us if it wasn't against the law. Since it is illegal, we can never know for sure that those around us truly don't want to murder us. However, without such laws, there would be no dynamic system at all, and so the uncertainty is necessary. it is important that necessary existential uncertainty is defined from unnecessary uncertainty. But how might one determine that distinction? It's up to the dynamic system and what makes the system possible. Without free exchange, the necessary and the unnecessary cannot be determined, though that's not to say there are ever any guarantees. Free exchange is the dynamic process through which the good is determined through testing by individuals. This process is a necessary process, for everyone thinks the good is self-evident, for everyone's good is self-evident to them. If we like fishing, it is self-evident that fishing is good, because it is evident to us. Obviously, though, not everyone is us, and so we can't say that everyone likes fishing. This isn't to say there is no such thing as the good, but that what constitutes the good is a complicated matter. There are general goods, such as the good of everyone being able to desire their own good, but there are also subjective goods, like tastes and preferences. Without more objective goods, there can be no subjective goods, as nothing can be relative, which lacks a thing to be relative to. Yet, at the same time, more objective goods look like merely subjective goods, and determining which is which, regardless, requires going through individual preferences, and free exchange is where that testing and going through can take place. Laws are to set the parameters in which free exchange can best sort out the good from the bad, and laws that try to replace free exchange tend to cause immoral discrimination. This isn't to say that free exchange is perfect, only that it is a dynamic system, while laws are more stagnant. Without a solid framework, though, a dynamic system can devolve into chaos, so free exchange needs laws, as laws need free exchange. Not because free exchange is better than laws, but because the decision-making processes of millions of individuals tend to be more accurate than the decision-making processes of a few on behalf of those millions. Free exchange decentralizes decision-making, and the more people who make decisions, the higher the probability good decisions gradually rise to the surface. When decisions are decentralized, the more decisions can be made without a given decision tearing down the whole system. And so the higher the probability good decisions eventually emerge and build upon one another, increasing the efficiency of the whole process through time. It takes time to determine the good and to create goods which mirror it, and the more time people have, the more decisions which can be made. As long as no single decision can ruin it for everyone, it's only a matter of time before good socioeconomic decisions arise. For no one makes decisions thinking they're bad, but the only time and consequences can unveil what's more likely the case. Most people seem to be relatively good at discerning good decisions from bad decisions, and so when good decisions are made, people tend to be attracted to them. Furthermore, people are good at determining wealth from non-wealth, for humans are usually experts at discerning what improves the quality of their own lives. Everyone thinks their view and their product is good, by definition, so there needs to be a system framed by laws in which ideas and products can be tested, which is to say there needs to be an arena of free exchange. Furthermore, there needs to be a system in which people can vote for what they think is indeed the best product and indeed the best idea, and this is a function of money. A dollar is a ballot. To spend money at McDonald's today at 2 p.m. is to say that the best good for 2 p.m. today is eating at McDonald's, though whether or not this is right, only the spender is in a position to say. Similarly, a political arena functions as a similar testing ground, but there is a difference between voting once a year and voting for what we think is the best vacuum and using it per se. One-on-one interaction has a higher probability of accuracy than distinct assessment, not because the latter is necessarily wrong, but because it's simply a matter of probability that we make right decisions more so regarding what we are familiar with on a day-to-day basis than in regard to what we hardly interact with or directly experience. We vote in politics, but it is likely our votes count regarding what we more directly experience. We vote in politics, but it's likely our votes count regarding what we more directly experience. Free exchange helps distinguish the good from the bad, though no one can say for sure at a given point which is which overall. There's only the decision-making of each particular individual in his or her particular world doing the best that individual can. In the end, everyone benefits from the best efforts of all. It is tempting here to skip this endless process and lay down a universal law. Fear and/or a sense of justice makes this hard to resist, but this top-down approach would circumvent the very process through which what is best can be determined. Ironically, the very act to do what's best can be the act which makes doing what's best indeterminable. Yet, since free exchange is an organic system of disorder that gives rise to profoundly complex order, it looks passive and even impartial to the good. The top-down approach, seemingly doing something, is then rationally embarked upon to straighten everything out. However, we can never see the whole sea. The act of looking is the act of shrinking. Considering this, if a social order begins to dissolve, say because givens collapse, it is unlikely that a top-down approach would be able to solve the problem without causing grave unintentional consequences. We need processes by which people can organize themselves. And if that system leads to people organizing themselves negatively, only the people can likely fix their situation, which they might not. Unfortunately, the brain itself seems biased toward initiative and a prejudice against passivity, which makes us culturally against free exchange and in favor of legal force, meaning we are naturally primed to turn to law to solve the socio-logical problems discussed in Belonging Again. We often think of taking action as better than doing nothing, when in fact doing nothing could be the right course. If a worm is struggling to escape a cocoon and yet we do nothing, we allow the worm to become a butterfly. If though we felt we needed to do something and tried to help the worm, which was obviously in need of help, we'd kill it. Humans see exteriors, not interiors, and so our very reality pushes us toward activities that look to be doing something, as elaborated on in Centralization by O.G. Rose, even when action could make things worse, a realization which can help us be more discerning. Furthermore, the Hegelian need for us to ultimately be concrete means we cannot just avoid action altogether, autonomous inaction, though that would certainly make things easier. Section 5. Free exchange is a dynamic process spread across millions of individuals making millions, if not billions, of decisions that organically arises to a checked and balanced, though still possibly not optimal result that has a high likelihood of being best, or at least the best possible in this world that we can recognize as likely the best. This notion is deeply inspired and expanded upon by Friedrich Hayek, and he basically argues that I'd rather ask an idiot who's eaten at a restaurant if it's good than an Einstein who's never visited. This isn't to say there is no place for the genius and or intellectual, only that the ideas of the genius should not be the default standard of what is right. But instead, they should be presented to the people versus pressed down upon them to be processed perhaps billions of times over, so that the best chance of being the best ideas can gradually, freely, and organically change culture. Einstein may say the restaurant was fantastic, but until many more people try out the restaurant, a form of processing, a reliable and unalienating consensus about it cannot be readily established. Free exchange acknowledges, as Hans Gadamer wrote about in Truth and Method, that there is no one rule book for every board game. As you cannot use the rules of Monopoly for chess, you cannot use the rules, principles, theories, and so on of one person's life for another. Just compare a sarcastic conversation with a non-sarcastic conversation about the same subject. There are differences, not because there is no truth, but because there are different rules of how actuality is approached relative to one starting point. What's tricky, though, is that there has to be enough shared rules through law so that relation and society are possible, which is metaphorically like saying we all have to agree it is a mountain we are climbing, not an ocean we are swimming across. And this is where the trouble lies. A mountain only has one summit, but based on where we start, there are different maps, and to use the map that starts on the other side of the mountain would cause us to get lost, and so think there is no summit/actuality. In free exchange, participants compare and trade their maps, and so help one another figure out which way they need to travel relative to their life to reach the summit. In the life into which we are thrown, to use an idea from Heidegger, it is not guaranteed that we start from the right map. We might, and we might not. Through free exchange, testing, and experimentation, we try to find out the nature of our map. Through this process, we can provide ourselves reason to believe our map is the right or wrong one and to stand against existential uncertainty. Without such testing, even if we have the right map, we can never gain reason to believe our map is right. Hence, it alienates us. Part of the noted testing is comparison and learning from the maps of others. In a dynamic system, even when one does reach a conclusion, their conclusion may still be wrong. But at least the person is not declaring that all the other maps must be like my map. Those who are wrong will rather just keep going until they realize they are lost. and then they will have to take a good look and reevaluate their map again. In a dynamic system, they will be free to do so, and to do so for themselves. Please note that this testing does not include testing out things that harm others or infringe upon the liberties of others. Of course, one must ask what constitutes those unallowable tests, and to determine that, we need a dynamic system, which of course could make mistakes and permit the horrible, and this is where the trouble lies. Free exchange might seem identical to majority rule, but is different in critical, more existentially stabilizing ways. As already noted, free exchange isn't simply a matter of one vote of each individual that occurs once every now and then, but a matter of many votes of each individual that occurs many times daily. Free exchange is always taking votes per se, whereas an election only takes votes every 2 or 4 years. There is much more decision-making, which is why it is more dynamic. Furthermore, it overcomes bad ideas not through outlawing them, but through testing and competition. All of us want mental balance, and we all naturally come up with explanations and rationalizations to achieve it. And there are no angles we won't take that aren't unambiguously denied to us, meaning the state might not be in the best position to stop us, as we'll discuss. If we don't get the lead part in the play, we can say it's because we weren't feeling good or because we didn't want it. If I get fired from my job, it's because my boss hates me. The human is a master at creating explanations, and since this is so, a dynamic system is needed to test and challenge explanations. Without this system, there is only rationalization, whether true or false, and rationalization leads to people splintering apart into tribes which share their rationalization. Sure, all well and good, but isn't free exchange often slower than law and full of the good, the bad, and the ugly? Probably. Though a dynamic system is needed to claim what constitutes too slow and the good, the bad, and the ugly, though regardless, free exchange is necessary. Are there mistakes in a dynamic system? Absolutely. If we remove laws against drugs, for example, there will be unintended consequences, but that is precisely a reason to seek a dynamic system. There are always unintended consequences, but in a dynamic system, we can learn from them and quickly adapt. However, in a stagnant system, such as those created by the state and its laws, unintended consequences are made more permanent. In a dynamic system, the unintended consequences of drugs occur and are countered. In a stagnant system, the unintended consequences occur and continue. The consequences may even be moralized, making them nearly impossible to fix. However, a dynamic system may also erase the good, move on, and never look back at what was lost, say in the case of Givens. Free exchange follows the causality of high-order complexity, as explored in Experiencing Thinking by O.G. Rose. And so when someone says we should rely on free exchange, what they are suggesting cannot be readily grasped. What they are asking for sounds like faith, for free exchange cannot be conceptualized, only experienced, and thus there seems to be no rational or empirical reason to give it a shot. And in fact, by such standards, it would seem to be irrational. And so free exchange, driven by rationality, is resisted by rationality. Free exchange seems like doing nothing, which cannot be conceptualized, and so we will likely gravitate toward comprehensible acts of taking initiative, as similarly outlined in Concerning Epistemology by O.G. Rose. This being the case, when faced with the sociological problems explored in Belonging Again, we might be tempted to turn to the state or law to fix our situation, for not doing so could feel like doing nothing. And indeed, there are no guarantees that free exchange will address our problems, especially if it is operating according to AA versus AB. A dynamic system is no more dynamic than its agents. The higher the critical thinking, the more dynamic the people. But where there is no critical thinking, even where there is utter liberty, the dynamic system might not function. Not because it cannot work, but because it is not powered to do so, like a functional unplugged television or a dysfunctional plugged-in television. Still, the state can only act in a manner that creates ambiguity, as we'll discuss. And if existential anxiety is at the root of our problem, this is not a solution. To allude to Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb and The Creative Concord by O.G. Rose, free exchange is a system in which disorder can make it stronger, assuming creativity is present. And though most use this idea regarding innovation and economics, the idea might also apply to morality. As the more businesses are allowed to fail, the more creativity and innovation can manifest. Likewise, the more people are allowed to pursue their idea of the good and have that idea confirmed or deconstructed, the more morality and justice will manifest. We simply don't know what is the good with absolute certainty, and so we have to experiment, test, and make mistakes. And as long as those attempts do not tear down the whole system or ruin others, those mistakes could be allowed. But doesn't that mean we allow bad things to happen? Isn't that monstrous? Indeed, it can be monstrous to let businesses fail. But for an anti-fragile system, a lack of failure destroys it. Few, if anyone, thinks they worsen injustice. Unless depraved, they do not define their actions as such, or otherwise they would stop. Most everyone agrees that injustice and immoral discrimination are wrong. The real disagreements concern how disagreement is to be prevented and what constitutes disagreement. Furthermore, if people are told what constitutes injustice versus be convinced of it, they can grow resentful and rebel. However, at the same time, there are plenty of examples in history where people believed something was good that was actually oppressive, and it was important for the state to use law to force people to change their ways. But this presents us with a severe dilemma. Free exchange is a process by which people test their ideas of the good and are gradually convinced of their rightness and wrongness. This is an existential process, and it allows people to shift their views or maintain views that can help them feel comfortable with changing their views or can help them feel comfortable in keeping their views. It is not possible for us to objectively justify human rights, but if free exchange supports and maintains human rights, then it becomes easier to believe that human rights are probably right and good. Similarly, if we grow up believing that women shouldn't work, but then through a process of free exchange we see that women can work and even are better off for the chance, we can emotionally and psychologically shift from our view at a rate we can handle. If we are told to change our view immediately at the onset without a gradual process of existential adjustment, we might harden and become adamant in our position. If this were to occur, though I originally would have changed my position through time, now I might not. But what if I held a view that men are superior to women and that men have a right to mistreat women? Are we really going to allow me to gradually change my views through a process as I prove existentially ready for it? Isn't this injustice? Indeed, here we can allude to the problem outlined in The Death of Process by O.G. Rose. As the main function of science isn't so much to verify truth as it is to provide a sense of actuality against existential uncertainty and doubt through falsification, so the main function of free exchange isn't just to verify what's best, but to provide solid enough of a sense of what's the case that we aren't anxious and always doubting it. Yes, this runs the risk of us having confidence in something wrong, but that risk is necessary. To do away with it would require a system of verification that would inevitably fail. Quicker than free exchange, law can be used to force people to check their views, but it runs the risk of trying to change people before they are ready through gaining existential confidence, which could cause a backlash. Considering this, it's possible that a law passed to stop an injustice could end up causing more of that very injustice. However, society also needs law, and there are also times when law was needed to stop racism, violence, and the like. We face a difficult trade-off of competing goods. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Anchor, Instagram, YouTube. And for the entire Belonging Again playlist, you can find it on YouTube and for all the sections on Medium in a list. And thank you so much for your time.